Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Our report details how advertising through television transforms strangers to your product into acquaintances, and acquaintances into friends, and friends into customers. You could almost say, as a result, that television puts into every living room a selling machine.
Hi, everybody. We're back. Nice 2-week hiatus, but Kinescope is back on the air by a semi-popular demand. I got to tell you, Gabe, a lot of people at Baltimore were telling me how much they enjoy Kinescope and are enjoying learning about the early days of television with us. John Suntress here, Gabriel Hardman. Good to see you, buddy.
Nice to see you, John. This is the longest time we've spent not seeing each other in more like a year and a half. But we handled it. We got through it, and we're back.
Absolutely, man. Very excited about today's show, taking a look at the career and brilliance of Ernie Kovacs. When were you first aware of Ernie Kovacs, Gabe?
Like the first time, I don't think that I ever saw a lot of Kovacs until later. But my first awareness was that I was a huge Late Night with David Letterman fan, and Kovacs was checked as one of the influences. Particularly in those early days of it, where they were, doing more experimental stuff, where they were, where like it was a lot looser, the early morning show, and then the earliest days of the late night show. But the funny thing is, going back and looking at the actual Kovacs material, even though everybody talks about it in terms of these talk shows and stuff, I think it's kind of less that. A lot of it is with the sketches to a degree. But for somebody, my age, it's probably a little more akin to Mr. Show or Tim and Eric or something like that. Just something that they're sketches, they're sort of blackout sketches, but it's also very, very visually driven, and almost more visually driven comedy than almost anything I can think of since in television. Which and certainly at the time, television comedy was stuff like Milton Berle. It was, for the most part, it was even your Show of Shows, which we covered before. It's mostly about kind of filmed vaudeville on some level. It's the content could vary and whatever, be more or less sophisticated. It's not a judgment call on that, but like still basically something filmed on a stage or shot on a stage rather, but as opposed to like created for the camera, using the medium of television in a way that people hadn't before, and the comedy are the visuals, to a large extent. So it's super interesting, and I'm always super interested in just the stuff where where it's about the form, where people are using the form to do something different.
Yeah, I'll admit that we're stretching a little bit because a lot of the video clips I'm going to show are the last specials that Kovacs did for ABC in the early 60s. They were 30-minute specials. PBS did an amazing job of presenting these in the early 80s. And in fact, the first clip I want to show is narrated by Jack Lemmon, who was a great friend of Kovacs. They actually made a movie together called Operation Madball, which is kind of a wacky army 50s comedy and stuff. And that's where they first met and really became great friends. And this is the opening sequence to the PBS show. And it'll give you an idea of some of the visual gags that Kovacs was known for. Here we go.
This is Jack Lemmon speaking. Ernie Kovacs was the funniest, wildest, zaniest man I ever knew. Ernie thought so too, and so did millions of happy people. Ernie was all over television on one network or another from 1950 until he died in 1962. He had an unpredictable and illogical view of the world. He played with the medium of television in a way no one ever had before, and he created a batch of cockeyed characters that have become classics. So slow down your internal clock. It was a more leisurely time, you know. Here's Ernie Kovacs.
Stuff like that, you know? I mean, and the great thing is, like you said, Gabe, he was ahead of his time, but he was also very contemporary as well. Was not afraid to poke fun at advertising, the networks, everything like that. And he was greatly visual even in the pre-video tape years. But once video happened, man, that guy took full advantage of the new medium and really like discovered some incredible things the way he played with it.
Right. I mean, I think it basically his career kind of straddles these two eras because he started in live television. He started at a time where the technical capabilities were extremely limited. Even in, he was in Philadelphia. He wasn't even network material, and then, by the end of his career, in the post, in the videotape era, like post 56 or 58 or whatever, depending on who you ask, it's more like he's instead of tailoring everything to the live broadcast the way that you would have to in the past, he was able to take pieces of videotape and cut them together, using the editing and using the kind of effects and the editing to tell that story, and especially do a lot with music, a lot of stuff where music was directly synced to the visuals, which a lot of these things people say they're silent bits. I mean, but in that it only means that there's not talking. I mean, the silent bits are actually almost all timed to music in a way where that is reinforcing the comedy, or at least reinforcing what they're trying to get across in the scene. And that's distinctly different from silent comedians, from Buster Keaton or Chaplin or whoever, who, while a lot of those movies had scores that were written for them that were distributed that somebody would play in a theater, there was no way to sync the sound to them to counterpoint what's going on in such a direct way. So like he was really using everything, all the technological stuff to get across the kind of interesting ideas.
And his music choices for some of these blackout jokes are just ridiculous. And again, I'm going to cut now. And remember, everybody, this is 1962, and you're going to hear, you might recognize the music. It's a version of Mac the Knife of the Three Penny Opera, and of course, Bobby Darin had the pop hit with Mac the Knife. But this is
the kind of Bertolt Brechty, Kurt Weill German version, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And also for people who wonder, the wavy lines that you're going to see, that's is it an oscilloscope?
Oscilloscope, yeah.
Yeah. And it's the sound waves of the song. And again, just look at this like visual pastiche. Here's a shorty.
Bet you thought it was your set. Just me, I have the slow focus. Okay, Ted.
Okay, stand by, please.
Und der Haifisch, der hat Zähne und die trägt im Gesicht.
There you go. Just a little snippet. We've got more blackouts coming.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the bits are very, very short blackout sketches. I mean, which is a kind of vaudevillian thing, right? But It's also, but like but using using the visuals of television, using the way that television works, which, it has close-ups. You can decide exactly what people are seeing, as opposed to a big proscenium where, where people are taking in the entire sketch all at once.
Yeah.
I mean, and he did start out in live TV though. I mean, he started out like in Philadelphia, like on initially a show called Pick Your Ideal, which was some kind of fashion show, and then went on to a thing called Deadline for Dinner, which was a cooking show that he did with the chef called Albert Mathis. But it just turned into like this kind of goofy thing where the chef didn't really think, was in on the gag as well, and they would just end up not even necessarily actually making the meal that they were setting out to do, right? So I mean, and that stuff became relatively popular, like locally, and to the point where and he created a lot of the kind of later famous characters back then, and but ended up having it ended up basically being a morning show. He got a morning show which was expanded to 2 hours. It was like 2 hours to fill in the morning of basically improvised stuff with just whatever props and gags they could think of. Supposedly he was frequently just late to the tapings. Like he would not, he wouldn't show up on time. He would either be there like the second they started to roll, or supposedly there was a time where he didn't show up for like 15 minutes of the show, and then just came in and was like, "Hey, you guys are doing a great job. I was watching at home." And that kind of irreverence, which is obviously, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that obviously they appeal to me for the late night with David Letterman type stuff. And, and I guess that really that early stuff kind of has more of that feel, and a bit of Conan as well. Like the NBC Conan show, the early on had a sense of these kind of absurdist sketches and stuff.
And mentioning that he started in Philadelphia, this was the era when really Philadelphia was one of the major television hubs from both a local standpoint, but also, if not national, then certainly regional.
Right. Because, but it wasn't on, his show wasn't on the network, though.
No, it wasn't.
Because that becomes an issue.
But I think again, it was just that there were these pockets of big cities, and LA was really more of a film town. There was obviously early TV as well. But yeah, I mean, Philadelphia really, that's where the Mike Douglas show came from, and I want to say Westinghouse in general. And maybe that's why early television really did generate from there. But really, and again, Chicago was also one of these hubs as well. We'll explore a Chicago show in the weeks ahead. Studs Terkel's TV show. But you're right. No, he was a big local sensation, and then was tapped by NBC, and at a very interesting time. Am I right? Didn't he start first as a summer replacement for The Tonight Show for Steve Allen?
Yeah, for Steve Allen. Although what happened in between, though, was that morning show was competition for the Today Show, and it was popular enough locally that they didn't, that the station didn't want to take it off the air and put on the Today Show,
right?
Until NBC basically just came and leaned on him, and were basically no, look, this is the show. You're putting this show on, right? And so he ended up losing these, even though, being popular and certainly being interesting and innovative, he ended up going through a million different iterations of shows that, there wasn't like one where it stuck and that was, his Tonight Show or anything like that.
He was an acquired taste too. I mean, you're right. Yeah. I mean, he definitely had fiercely loyal fans, and also was a guy that was not afraid to take on the networks and say, no, we're doing it my way. Yes. And a lot, and that really did cost him a lot of shows and a lot of opportunities. But again, the visual gags were amazing. I believe it was still in the local days when he hooked up with his wife, Edie Adams, who
I think that's correct.
Was terrific and was really hired to be a girl singer. And this was certainly of the days when you would cut to girl singers. Steve Allen had them. All of the television hosts had them as well.
Yeah, I mean, she might have even been a woman at that point. But
nice.
The show we were talking about, the morning show, was called 3 to Get Ready, and initially, and I believe that she was just hired as a singer, but the kind of incredibly chaotic way that they would produce these things. They just pulled her into stuff, and she was, she got used to it, and she got into it, and she
was good.
And she was good, and they ended up getting married, and they, they were together for the rest of his life. But yeah, there were other stuff on that morning show. I just thought that it was funny that, like, they would just have things where he would just wander around the studio and the cameras would force to follow him. He would go into the, to the control room and just play cards with the director for a while, or spend like 15 minutes on totally inane segments and stuff. I just think that's so great. It's so, like, I mean, imagine, and this is starting in 1950, this is really nascent television stuff. And so, I mean, imagine tuning into this and just not even having the context for what it was. It's so great.
Right. And it was a lot of improvisational stuff and really early performance art. I mean, especially as he got used to using the camera. And also we mentioned Letterman. I think it was one of the reasons why Letterman's original big voice announcer in the early NBC days was this guy, Bill Wendell.
Yeah.
And you could see the list of shows beyond Kovacs that Bill Wendell was doing back then. Wide Wide World, the NBC Color Spectaculars. Those were the Max Liebman specials that he made after leaving Sid Caesar. I assume that Sky's the Limit and Step This Way might have been game shows. I'm not sure. I didn't do my research.
I don't know, but I was super excited when I was like this, early Letterman mega fan. I'm watching this thing and I was like, hey, that's Bill Wendell's voice. Like, before I actually looked it up, and because I used to go to the live tapings of Letterman as well. So when Bill Wendell would come out and introduce the show and do a couple questions with the audience before Letterman would come out. So that's like, oh my God, like I'm 1 degree away from and an entire audience away from Ernie Kovacs there.
100%, man. No, and again, that's he would, as I showed this picture of them doing the Mr. Question Man segment, which was a parody of the Answer Man, which was pre-Karnak, a bit that Steve Allen would do on his show. And there's a bit of a rivalry between Allen and Kovacs through their career.
Yeah. Probably because Allen stole a bunch of shit from him.
Right.
And didn't really want, although I think Allen was relatively supportive of him, right? I think he recommended him for the NBC job, or at least that's what I read. And in some biography style documentaries about Kovacs, he's interviewed and he talks about him. One from the early 80s and then like another one a little later. And, and in one of them, they ask him basically about whether, about stealing stuff from him. And he gives this mealy-mouthed answer about, a lot of us were feeding off each other in the early days of television and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, but I would, if I had known a writer had stolen any material from him, surely I would have, it's just nonsense. And it did certainly seem to be the case that the lesser known Kovacs show was just having its material stolen by the bigger Tonight Show.
Absolutely, man. No, it was crazy. I wanted to show another clip, and this is great. This isn't funny, but this really shows Kovacs' visual sense and the kind of little bits he would do. It's self-explanatory of what we're about to see, but you just appreciate it from the visual aesthetic and also, again, matching some really interesting music to these visuals.
And basically that sequence, goes on for quite a while. It doesn't have a clear gag to it, throughout most of, it's such an interesting way that they were willing to push stuff. And, just experiment with stuff, even if it wasn't, even though so much of it are these kind of very short blackout sort of gags, it wasn't all like that. And a lot of the longer sequences are very like absurd or sort of experimental or kind of, they're abstract in a certain way that is
Absolutely.
not, that is just not what you would think of for the time.
No,
or any time for that matter. Who's doing that?
But again, I kind of, and forgive me because I'm a layman and I don't know what the painted art style of that era was, but I really think from a video standpoint, he was tapping into a lot of that experimental and expressionistic kind of vibe of the 50s.
It also looks like a Kenneth Anger short or something like that. I mean, it's the experimental filmmaker and writer of the dubious Hollywood Babylon. It's like it is something that feels very much of the era. It feels very much of that that style. But like, what, I'm not even sure what the intent was exactly. But there's something about this I love.
Oh yeah, and it's, I mean, as you say, it's a longer piece, and I didn't want to show the whole thing because it really is.
It's pretty long, yeah.
But essentially, it's like his version of a time-elapse sequence of going from that night alley sequence, and it ends in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's just as it was showing. It's the street lamps. It's the newspaper guy sitting at, standing at the corner and stuff, stroking the cat. And again, with this weirdly interesting, sinister music.
And there is a certain kind of David Lynchy quality to some of this stuff too,
absolutely.
Which is, I don't, I go out of my way not to bring up David Lynch, but it's not inappropriate for some of this,
Absolutely, man. There's another show that he did in the mid 50s that was known as either Eugene or The Silent Show.
Yeah.
And it was this very interesting half hour. Martin and Lewis had broken up, and NBC was ready to give Jerry Lewis 2 hours to do a variety special, sketches, music, everything. Lewis only had 90 minutes. So at the end of it, they needed 30 minutes to fill the 2 hours, and they went to Kovacs. And it's amazing because what Kovacs did was, and it was such a great contrast to the bombastic style of Jerry Lewis, all the nuts, the pandemonium, the voices, lady, all that crap. And then you go to this 30-minute silent sequence of Eugene, this pantomime character that's just going about his life. And there are, again, these incredible visual gags. And here's one of them right away.
The unplugging at the end is the best part.
So,
and it's the whole thing has these very stylized minimal sets. And it's I mean, apparently, you were saying that critically the people paid attention to the Kovacs thing more than the Jerry Lewis thing. Right?
Yeah. There's, I mean, and again, because you can hear music and you can hear sound effects, but there's no dialogue. And it's great. It starts, and people really need to watch this on YouTube. It starts with this long crawl of, all day you've heard nothing but talk. It's, whether it's in the office or your house or whatever, we're going to give you 30 minutes of silence. And they proceed to do these 30 minutes. And it's just amazing, the various sight gags. Here's another great scene.
And supposedly, like the network, like the executives and stuff, were just like ridiculing them the whole time, like in prior to the show, and like, which also begs the question: how did this guy have the power to pull off these things? I guess just being tenacious about it, and not and not giving in. I mean, I know that there was a show that he did in like the in the early or mid 50s where he was, I think it was called Kovacs on the Corner, where they kind of tried to shoehorn him into a kind of Fred Allen sort of talk showy format, and or that's not a talk show, but you know what I mean, like a specific format, and it didn't go over because he didn't, he just needed to be able to, kind of create chaos and innovate and stuff.
Yeah, there's a great after I Love Lucy ended its half-hour shows, they had one season called the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, and he's a guest on there. And much as in this Eugene show, he would have a marker and draw something, and then it would become real. And on Lucy and Desi, he drew a refrigerator, and he called it Isobox, like an Italian would say, like her, bad Chico Marx kind of Italian. And he had a little knob on it, and he opened up, and there were ice cubes inside the drawing. And it's just kind of weird shit like that he would do. The best bit that he did in Eugene, and it's very long, but I did cut it down to some of the choicer bits. He tilted the camera on a 45-degree angle and then built the set to also be on that same angle. So from our perspective, it's just like you and I sitting like this, but you will see what looks like incredible magic happening with various props. And it's all because this was, again, shot on an angle to achieve a motion effect. And this is self-explanatory.
And it has to be said that, like, he wasn't solely responsible for everything, right? Like, he was kind of an idea guy. He also had there was another guy who acted on all this stuff, but was sort of a gag man for him, called Andy McKay, but he also would let you know, he would come up with an idea and to sort of like challenge the technical people on the show to figure out how to do it, you know. And and so obviously it had to be a very collaborative thing technically, because a lot of this stuff was still being figured out. Even in the later era, they were still figuring out how to like, you know, shoot and cut stuff on tape and put it all together in that way.
But he would, you know, again, he'd play with the medium. I mean, he would double expose himself and have sword fights against himself, things like that. And, you know, you saw earlier with the vacuum bit, those bits of white were, I guess, early blue screen kind of effects or whatever, or
I mean, I guess it's you know, chroma key type stuff, but I don't exactly understand how that worked at the time.
No, it's I mean, and again, for you know, this breakthrough of videotape just even expanded his ideas, and again, the crew as well. Was it Joe Ahern? Wasn't that his great director as well?
I think that's correct. That was his name. Right.
No, the guy was amazing. And then also he had these other like characters that he would do, and one in particular was terrific. Poetry on television was a big thing in the early days. And he had his own character. His name was Percy Dove Tonsils. And let's take a moment and get some poetry from Percy.
Not you silly. They put everything. I complained about the daisy being unreal the other day. They have a real daisy in here. They have real gin in here. It's a real stuffed olive. Only the pimento is plastic. You think they wouldn't go through so much trouble just to cheat a little bit on the budget, would you? Well, it is good to see you again. And may Allah smile on your orthicon tube. You notice Whistler's mother is no longer with me. I decided to be more contemporary. Actually, I'm holding this place. I'm getting a copy of Gainsborough's Blue Boy, which I intend having painted a different color. It doesn't go with the room. But that will be there. In fact, I have written a poem about Mona Lisa as one of the great works of art. This is entitled Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa, you always smile, like heather up on the heath. How come you never laugh out loud? Could be you have bad teeth. I have a second poem. And remember, I'm full of clues. You used to say you're full of prunes, remember? It wasn't no other day. Penny candy, and you say you're full of prunes. 22 chicken specter. Now then. This one is called the moon. The moon is full of craters. It has some mountains too. But because there are no people, no one goes to the zoo.
Awesome. Come on.
Okay.
Come on.
No. I mean, you know, certainly there is a level of gay panic stuff there, but I do think that it kind of holds up on its own. I do think it is also impossible for me to look at him and not think of Forrest Ackerman, the publisher of Famous Monsters magazine, because like he's wearing these novelty glasses that are just like from a novelty store, right? It's just junk, right? And but they somehow give that impression of the overly thick glasses of Forrest Ackerman.
Sure.
But I don't know. I do think that still works. I do think that it's funny.
I do too. And I hope no one takes offense that's watching. I think it's interesting. And also, yeah, it's an extreme parody, but it is a little groundbreaking that he kind of subversively gets in this kind of gay character and everything.
I mean, I don't know how groundbreaking that is, because like the entirety of like everything has been about, has had, signifying gay characters for villains, and like it's there's always been that, but it is, but I think that it's, it's a great performance though. Like the way that he carries it off is great, and the way that he has, just the little mannerisms of the way that I don't know. It is kind of, I do think it's kind of a great performance, and I do think that we can, as much as John and I can get in fights about this sort of stuff, I do think that we are, we're looking at things that are, that are from a different era, and it's not an excuse. It's not, it's not accepting everything to look at it and and try to look at it on its own terms and not just pretend like it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and again, I just love how extemporaneously he was just doing his little bits of business, really to amuse the crew as much.
Yes, yeah, I know, because I think that it's the crew laughing in the background. Like they didn't have, they didn't have, for the most part, he didn't want studio audiences. He didn't like studio audiences.
They got in the way.
Yeah,
they got in the way of the timing of his bits.
Yeah, and the control. Like you lose a certain degree of control because they're also, they're shooting these things in a less a proscenium way. It would be less enjoyable for an audience to sit there when the camera is right on top of him and the things are not staged for an audience as much as they're staged for the camera.
There's also a real life tragedy that was going through a very good portion of his career, and it's depicted in a TV movie that Jeff Goldblum made, and it was called Between the Laughter, I want to say, or Behind the Laughter.
Between the Laughter, I think, or something like that.
And it's obviously a dramatization, but essentially, prior to Edie Adams, his first wife, he had 2 daughters with her.
Between the Laughter. Ernie Kovacs, Between the Laughter, from 1984.
Right. 1984, very good.
Yeah.
Very, very early in Jeff Goldblum's career, pretty much
before The Fly. Yeah, I mean, he had been in a lot. I mean,
Big Chill.
He was in Nashville in 1975, but he didn't really break out until the mid 80s. Yeah,
right, and he does a great job, I think. And I mean, and it's still Goldblum. I mean, it's not a direct imitation, but you don't want that. You want good acting. Sure. And Kovacs' first wife basically kidnapped his children, and for years he didn't know where they were. And they had divorced and for in very apparently she was troubled to a degree, and as evidenced by her actions, but the court had actually granted him custody of the kids, which was in the 50s, was not a norm, it was a very rare thing. And then she ended up kidnapping them, and they had no idea what happened to them for quite a while. He and his father, his father and him, I think, would go down to, they thought that maybe they were in Florida, and they would go down to Florida and just drive around hoping to asking people and hoping to somehow, find somebody. Obviously, the ability to communicate was much, much more limited in the 50s than it is now. And I think that ultimately, the lead that they got in order to find the kids was through his mom writing postcards to or something like that. Like she would just write postcards to places and with descriptions of the daughters and the mother and in hopes somebody would find it. And somehow that helped tip them off. I mean, that's what I read. I don't know exactly what the circumstances are. Do you know better? No, and also I'm not sure if this was part of the dramatization or a real thing where detectives or the police would be, we found your daughters and I'm sorry to say they're dead. And there's a very sad, tragic scene of him going to a morgue, and it's no, these aren't my daughters. And it's thank God, but also where the hell are they?
Sure.
Can you imagine? And also, and the man was still doing his kind of humor and pursuing his career while having this incredible tragedy of mystery over his head. So what I loved was in one of the books that I read about Kovacs, and it's so funny because I don't know if I always felt this way prior to the daughters saying this, but they saw Peter Pan, and the daughters are like, we want to learn how to fly. How do we learn how to fly, Daddy? And he took them to swim. And he's like, this is the closest thing to flying you can do, kids. And I always say that when I swim, especially being a superhero fan, it's like, this is the closest I can get to flying. And you really do feel that way. And I just think that's such a beautiful father-daughter thing that he would share with them and stuff. And I think, again, it's this amazing story of his life. And then, good Lord, of course, the tragic end to his life.
Yeah, I mean, he died in a car accident on, in Los Angeles. Yeah.
One of those steep streets or alleys that would end into traffic. And I've heard Carl Reiner talk about his friendship with Kovacs. And he said when he would drive with him, he goes, he'd drive like a maniac. And he'd be like, Ernie, slow down, whatever. And I guess it was slick roads. And he was coming out of an alley and he was barreling through, and a car jackknifed him and stuff and killed him. And this was 1962. A lot of what we're seeing are from his final specials for ABC in that year of 1962. So we really are seeing some of his last work in the stuff that we're covering. There's so many great compilations of both his live days and his videotape days, and I can't urge people enough to seek them out and really appreciate the man's humor, his eye. So many of these other musical sequences, like the cityscape thing that we showed, just really inventive ideas of marrying very strong orchestrational music with these weird little pantomime scenes. Or there's one great scene that takes place in a kitchen, and you see faucets going on and off, and a chicken dancing to the music and stuff.
Yeah.
Just crazy,
just absurdist, crazy stuff. Yeah. I mean, also, if we didn't say so, he was only 42 when he died. I mean, it was in 1962. It was right after these couple of specials that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And,
wouldn't it have been interesting to see him in the 70s and 80s still finding ways to, and God, think of all the video innovations that happened in the 80s. I have no doubt that Kovacs would have been on the vanguard in a lot of that stuff. I wish he and Mike Nesmith would have made some interesting video together, wouldn't they?
Yes. Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, I mean, he apparently he would call the TV work he did radio in reverse. Like, radio doesn't have, it's just sound and no picture. He focuses on the picture instead of, I mean, although he totally focused on the sound as well. And I think the fact that the stuff is so organic is what continues to make it interesting.
Edie Adams continued to have a career, and it's kind of cool. I really think, I mean, don't get me wrong, she's incredibly talented, I think. And here's a later shot of Edie. I mean, beautiful woman, obviously, but really capable of good comedy. She plays Sid Caesar's wife in It's a Mad, Mad, Mad. Or no, she plays Milton Berle's wife, right?
Yeah.
Yes, in It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World. Well, one of the two.
I'm sure she had a great time spending time with Milton Berle.
Yeah, actually, I believe it was Sid Caesar, because I think they're trapped in the.
Yeah, honestly, I can't remember. I hate to say it for somebody who listens to tons of podcasts about garbagey old show business and stuff. I can barely make it through It's a Mad, Mad World. I didn't grow up watching it. I don't find it funny. It's
it's a very divisive movie. I agree, because I think it's flawed, but has a lot of really great sequences in it. And then there are those that absolutely adore it. And certainly as it gets older and stuff, it's gotten a special place, because pretty much every working comedian, right. with an exception of a handful, are in this movie, from Buster Keaton to Jack Benny and Jerry Lewis and the Three Stooges, to all the leads like Jonathan Winters and Sid Caesar and Milton Berle. Dick Shawn is amazing in It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, in my opinion. I think is really one of the standouts in the film. And this is a couple of years before him as LSD and the producers and stuff. Ethel Merman is funny. It's one of Spencer Tracy's final films, and he's kind of the straight man in the movie, but I think is given interesting bits of business to do. Peter Falk and Rochester from Jack Benny are in it. So I find it interesting to watch, but I agree. And it's very long. It's very, very long.
It is very long. Yeah. Not that I've ever gotten to the end, but one thing about Edie Adams, though, was that also Ernie Kovacs didn't pay taxes, right? And for a good period of time, he got in enormous trouble with the IRS, and that was still going on when he died. So she was put in the position of having to pay off this debt, and basically she just worked and did, took jobs and did whatever she could to pay it off, and eventually did. But pay your taxes.
Yeah, and she's in one of those great Doris Day Rock Hudson movies, and I can't remember if it's Send Me No Flowers or Lover Come Back. It's not Pillow Talk.
It's a big blank spot for me. You're bringing up. I mean, look, I'm not. I'm not gonna be the counterculture guy who hates the Doris Day movies over here. But like, it's. I don't know. This is just not stuff that I don't know. I've seen Pillow Talk, but
Well, and also Kovacs, a great performance, a film performance. He's in Bell, Book, and Candle,
yes,
the Kim Novak, Jimmy Stewart movie, and plays this kind of weird beatnik doctor who is exploring the world of witchcraft.
Yeah,
and it's a great role for him. He's incredibly funny in that. Operation Madball, the movie I mentioned earlier with Jack Lemmon, Mickey Rooney is in that movie too. Not a great movie, but and Kovacs in that is kind of the put upon straight man of the army.
Yeah.
He's in North to Alaska, the Stuart Major John Wayne film, and plays a gambler that's kind of a con man and is basically the villain in that, but terrific, really, really funny in that. And so he did have occasional movies, or also, was it Our Man in Havana that he's in?
Oh,
I'm misremembering now.
I'm not sure about that. But it was, I guess, I don't know if this is kind of, there's some weirdness with this stuff, but like, I think that the original silent episode was from like 1956 or 57 or something like that. And then sort of remade in 61 as a special. But but off of that original broadcast, which I believe was in color, I read that it was an experimental sort of color thing in the mid 50s, mid to late 50s. And that on the strength of that is how he got a contract at Columbia and ended up coming out and doing Operation Madball and did the it had his movie career, which, I mean, sure, there are good performances and, it's fun in Bell, Book, and Candle and all that sort of stuff, but none of this is like, he's making money off of these things, but it's not, and probably a lot more than he was in television, but it's not like, this isn't using him to like, his fullest, right? Like this is not the innovator and the, and the guy who's like, kind of challenging the way television is made and all that. He's doing some character parts in movies, and that's fine and that's good. And it's good that he made some money, but it just isn't like, I just don't think, and there's nothing wrong with it. He's good in these movies, right? But it just seems like a little bit of a waste in a way, because I think that he could do so much more in,
absolutely,
his native medium,
No, he absolutely was best in these TV shows. There's no question about that. I wanted to acknowledge that Mark Friedman, who's watching, did correctly point out that it is Lover Come Back. That was the Doris Day Rock Hudson film.
Right.
It's all about the advertising world. And
I have seen that movie now.
And Rock is kind of a cad and creates a fake product. He and Doris are rival ad agency executives, and he creates a fake product. And one of his disposable girlfriends, that was the time, was Edie Adams, and she is. He sees the word, abbreviation VIP, and he creates this fake product called VIP. And Edie Adams is the VIP girl, and they shoot all these commercials about VIP and stuff. And again, she's a knockout. She's lovely, but also very, very funny as kind of this Southern Belle kind of easy girl. Let's put it that way. Well,
thank you for the clarification, Mark Friedman.
Indeed, we appreciate that, man. And I also another great thing, and really just shows you the Renaissance man that Kovacs was. He made this incredible book called Zumar, and Zumar is really this indictment of the ad world, the television network world. I have a copy of it, and I'm proud to have it, because it really is this crazy kind of another Kovacs project that I'm glad he wrote it. It is a real indictment of his era. But again, of course, it's Ernie Kovacs, man. He bites the hand that feeds him. And also another thing to look for on YouTube, Dutch Masters, the cigar company, was a big sponsor of his, and obviously always had a cigar in his mouth. We saw it in various clips. He made his own Dutch Masters commercials, and they also were very inventive and definitely not your typical ads. He also had a game show, and I'm getting it confused with Jackie Gleason's "You're in the Picture,"
Right.
but it was kind of similar to that, where it was like you had to like understand. There would be like a static shot of actors posed, or even a Kovacs bit, and it was almost like concentration, where it was an enactment of why does the chicken cross the road, and you had to figure it out from the visual that you saw. What kind of phrase it would represent. I'm not remembering the name of it.
I don't actually know anything about this, so that's interesting.
It's another weird attempt to conform Kovacs into something traditional, and it's like, yeah, good luck. Just let Ernie do his sketches. Right. That's really, and that was the great thing about ABC at the time. Obviously, well below the other two networks, they were more willing to experiment, and that's pretty cool. That they understood Kovacs' talent and gave him the opportunity to really do a lot of this great stuff in those 30-minute black and white videotape specials.
Right. This was the early 60s show on ABC, correct?
62. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was like a monthly 30-minute show in that same way that some of these shows really were on. Like, all right, we'll see you next month. I remember Jack Benny used to alternate with like George Gobel or somebody else. It's like, we'll see you in 2 weeks, folks.
Right. Yeah. They just didn't quite have the concept of stripping shows the way that they did, where, it would be every day of the week or every week or whatever. Yeah. I mean, I guess everybody figured out that having some level of consistency helped people understand that when your show was on.
Mark is clearly a massive Kovacs fan, because he is correct. The name of the game show was called Take a Good Look. That's awesome. Exactly what the name of the show was. And Dutch Masters loved him, obviously, because he was smoking cigars on camera, but they really supported all of his shows. And, as his career abruptly ended in 62, but they were always on his side as being a great sponsor of his. And I think that's pretty neat. I can't stress enough how much it's worth for people who, are listening or watching and only, know a cursory amount of, information about Kovacs. You got to watch this stuff. And so much of it is collected, and so much of it is worth watching.
Yeah. And it used to be difficult to see this stuff. I mean, I certainly would have gone out of my way to find that, if I could, in the, late 80s or whenever I was hearing about this stuff through the Letterman stuff. And I believe Merrill Marco was actually, who's the, original head writer on Letterman, was one of the ones who was really big on, or at least I've heard this in interviews she gave, that, she was the one who like looked to Kovacs, for inspiration for a lot of this stuff. But yeah, it was all very, it was hard to get your hands on. And I may have seen some at the, Paley Center in New York, which is, I think, called Museum of Television and Radio at the time. But,
that's right.
But like, very, it was hard to come by this sort of stuff instead. And now, there's YouTube, you can, it's very accessible, totally worth checking out. I mean, and I feel like, I was kind of talking to John about this before the show, but I feel like when we do these shows that are a little more retrospective, and as opposed to just looking at one individual episode of something, it's such a big topic. It's like, we're not really going to cover this in an hour or less. Right. I mean, and so, by all means, like, go look at these things and there's some little documentaries about him and stuff as well. He's a very interesting character, very interesting figure in television history.
Mark asked if we were going to show the used car bit. It is. We did show it earlier than your question, Mark. So I hope you'll rewind and watch that wonderful bit. It's part of the opening sequence to the PBS presentation of the ABC specials that happened in the early 80s with the Jack Lemmon narration at the beginning. I want to close out, and we can do it after we talk about what we're going to show next week. I have held back, and I wanted to end with one of the most famous pantomime bits he used to do, and that was the Nairobi Trio. If you've never seen it before, stick around after we say goodbye, and we'll close out with it because it's like 2 minutes long, and I think deserves to be seen uncut because and he did variations of it over the years, but it's self-explanatory of what it is. And again, he would find these weird songs. I mean, you heard the one with Eugene on the Silent Show during the 45-degree angle, and those kind of like old, like Rudy Valley kind of, and the Bertolt Brecht, Three Penny Opera, Mac the Knife and stuff, just the craziest songs. And I know he would do Mona Lisa in a similar kind of German or Yiddish presentation. I'm not sure, not being German or Yiddish, which it was, but just great music choices too. And certainly for the Nairobi Trio, this is just a bonkers song. Yeah. And it only is more bonkers when you see the actual sketch.
All right, John, well, tell us what we're going to do next week.
Well, I'm really excited for next week because it's a 2-part television production. It's called The Defender, and I believe it was on Studio One. And it stars Ralph Bellamy and William Shatner as a father-son lawyer team. They are defending a very young Steve McQueen, and it is peppered with great character actors and great leading men and women before their time. And it's pretty intense because Ralph Bellamy is not happy about defending Steve McQueen. And it's a courtroom drama, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes and not in front of the judge and during the testimonies. And it's really an exceptional thing. It was the basis. It was so popular that it became the basis of an early 60s drama that starred E.G. Marshall and Robert Reed from Brady Bunch. But it was a very socially aware program, the subsequent series. But even this, I think, had great tones of social issues as well. So really interesting drama next time. The 2-part Defender on Kinescope. So there you go, man. Thanks, Gabe. And hopefully we'll have more of the usual cast of idiots with us next time.
I think we will. I think the idiots are just busy this week.
That's cool. Well, we were busy for 2 weeks. Great to be back, everybody. Thanks a lot for watching. And to play us out, here's Ernie Kovacs and the Nairobi Trio.
Do, mi, sol, do. Re, sol, do, mi, do, fa, re, sol, sol. Mi, sol, la, re, fa, re, sol, do, mi, do, fa, re, sol, sol, do. Do, mi, fa, si, re, si, mi, la, do, la, fa, re, sol, sol. Do, mi, do, fa, si, re, si, mi, la, do, la, fa, re, sol, sol, do. Mi, sol, la, re, fa, re, sol, do, mi, do, fa, re, sol, sol. Mi, sol, la, re, fa, re, sol, do, mi, do, fa, re, sol, sol, do. Do, mi, fa, si, re, si, mi, la, do, la, fa, re, sol, sol. Do, mi, do, fa, si, re, si, mi, la, do, la, fa, re, sol, sol, do.
Our report details how advertising through television transforms strangers to your product into acquaintances, and acquaintances into friends, and friends into customers. You could almost say, as a result, that television puts into every living room a selling machine.